Let's start with a fundamental truth that most people never realize until it's too late. Your brain does not care if you're happy. It doesn't wake up in the morning with the goal of making you fulfilled. It's not scanning the world for your passions, your purpose, or your self-actualization. No, it's scanning for one thing: threat. Now, why is that important? Because most of the challenges we face, procrastination, anxiety, self-doubt, even burnout, they're not personal failures. They're not signs of laziness or weakness or lack of ambition. They are biological byproducts of a brain that is doing exactly what it evolved to do: keep you alive. That's a powerful realization. It means that a lot of the internal resistance we feel when we try to improve our lives, when we try to step outside our comfort zones or take a risk or say yes to something big, is not some character flaw. It's a survival mechanism. Let's break this down using what we know from neuroscience. The human brain, particularly the limbic system, the emotional brain, is essentially a pattern recognition machine. It doesn't just store memories, it stores meaning. And the meaning it assigns to an experience isn't based on truth, it's based on threat levels. For instance, let's say you spoke up in class when you were a kid and someone laughed at you. Your brain, being highly attuned to social threats, because being excluded used to be a literal death sentence in tribal societies, marks that as dangerous. Fast forward 20 years, and you're sitting in a boardroom with a brilliant idea, but you hesitate. Why? Your brain is scanning its archive, finding that old data point, and concluding, last time you did this, something bad happened. So it sends a signal. Tight chest, racing heart, hesitation, and you call it anxiety. You call it not being confident enough. You might even call it, I'm just not a public speaker. But that's not true. What's really happening is that your brain, wired for survival, is trying to protect you from a threat that no longer exists. The environment has changed. You're not 8 years old anymore, but the pattern in your brain has not been updated. This is what I want to drive home today. Your brain is not your master. It's your hardware. And like any hardware, it runs on code. If you don't consciously update that code, you will unconsciously repeat it. Now, let's talk about why happiness seems elusive to so many people. We live in a world that says we should feel good most of the time. But your brain does not prioritize feeling good. It prioritizes what's familiar. Because familiarity equals safety, safety equals survival. And this is where people get stuck. If you grow up in chaos, your brain associates chaos with normal. If you've lived most of your life playing small, avoiding conflict, minimizing yourself, that becomes your baseline. So even when opportunities for joy, growth, and success show up, your brain doesn't see them as positive, it sees them as dangerous. Because they're different. You might think, but I want to change. I want to be better. I want to grow, and I believe you. But wanting isn't enough. Your conscious mind wants growth. Your subconscious brain wants safety. And guess which one wins most of the time? The subconscious. The brain, because it controls the nervous system. It controls your state, controls your focus, your breathing, your decision making. Let me give you an example. There's a structure in the brain called the amygdala. It's part of that ancient limbic system we mentioned earlier. And its primary job is threat detection. When the amygdala perceives a threat, it activates the hypothalamus, which then signals the adrenal glands to release cortisol and adrenaline, your stress hormones. This is great if you're in a car accident or being chased by a wild animal, but it becomes a problem when your brain starts triggering that same threat response in response to sending an email, posting online, or applying for a new job. And that's exactly what happens for many people. Their brain reads uncertainty as danger, and the body responds with stress, even if the situation is actually safe. This is why so many people live lives that look fine on the outside but feel like survival on the inside. They're not thriving, they're managing, they're not growing, they're bracing. Every new opportunity is filtered through a threat detection system that hasn't evolved since the Stone Age. But here's the exciting part. The human brain is neuroplastic. That means it can change. You can literally retrain your brain to interpret challenge as opportunity instead of danger. You can teach it to favor growth over safety, but that retraining doesn't happen through motivation, it happens through action. Now let's shift into what I believe is one of the most misunderstood feelings we all experience: fear. Fear gets a bad rap. People think fear means stop, fear means turn back, fear means something's wrong. But from a neuroscientific perspective, fear is a signal. That's all it is. It's data. It's like the warning light on your car dashboard. When the fear signal goes off in your brain, it's not telling you, don't move forward. It's telling you, pay attention. Something important is happening here. Something unfamiliar, something with high stakes. And this is where your conscious mind must step in, because the automatic brain will always default to caution. Always. It's not designed to take risks. It's designed to minimize them. But risk isn't inherently bad. In fact, most of what we call growth lives on the other side of perceived risk. Starting a company, ending a toxic relationship, taking control of your health, speaking your truth. These things trigger the fear response not because they're dangerous, but because they're unknown. The brain doesn't like unknown, it can't predict the outcome, and so it floods the system with hesitation, second-guessing, anxiety. So what do most people do? They misinterpret that signal as a stop sign. I guess I'm not ready, maybe it's not the right time, what if I fail? And then they retreat. They don't just step away from the action, they step away from themselves, from their own evolution, from their own breakthrough. But here's what I need you to understand. Fear does not mean you're on the wrong path. It often means you're finally on the right one. Let's go deeper into the biology of this. The prefrontal cortex, our rational decision-making center, is capable of overriding fear, but only if it's trained. And how do you train it? Exposure. Repeated, deliberate exposure to the thing you fear reduces the emotional reactivity of the amygdala. That's not just theory, it's science. We've seen this in brain scans. Fear circuits light up at first, but over time, with repetition and safety, the intensity of the signal goes down. In practical terms, this means that doing the thing is the fastest path to no longer fearing the thing. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's action in the presence of fear. And every time you act, your brain learns, this didn't kill me, this didn't break me, this actually helped me, and it updates the code. I'll give you an example from the lab. We've done experiments on exposure therapy, where individuals with phobias, say fear of spiders, are slowly and safely introduced to the object of their fear. Over time, the amygdala activity decreases. The person feels less afraid. Their body stops reacting as intensely. Why? Because the brain has recalibrated its threat detection system. It has learned this is not a life or death situation. And this doesn't just apply to phobias, it applies to everything. You're afraid of being seen? Speak more. You're afraid of failure? Take more calculated risks. You're afraid of rejection? Put yourself in rooms where rejection is possible and growth is guaranteed. Because here's the truth, if you don't voluntarily expose yourself to discomfort, your brain will confine you to what it knows. And what it knows isn't what's best for you, it's just what it's used to. Every high performer I've ever studied, coached, or collaborated with understands this at a visceral level. They don't wait for the fear to go away. They move while carrying it. They act despite it. They actually use it as a signal that they're expanding. So I'll leave you with this framework. When you feel fear, don't ask, how do I get rid of this? Ask instead, what is this pointing me toward? Because chances are it's pointing toward a version of you that's bigger, bolder, and more capable than the one who's asking the question. Let your fear be your compass, not your cage. And remember, your brain's job is to keep you safe. Your job is to show it what's possible. Let's talk about something deceptively dangerous: comfort. Now, when we think of comfort, we associate it with safety, peace, ease. It sounds like a good thing, right? Something to aim for, maybe even something we deserve after a long day or a hard life. But here's the truth. From a neuroscientific standpoint, comfort is one of the most effective long-term traps your brain can set. Why? Because comfort provides a dopamine. When you avoid challenge, when you sleep in instead of getting up early, when you scroll instead of focusing, when you delay the hard conversation, your brain gives you a hit of relief. That relief releases dopamine, and dopamine, as we know, reinforces behavior. So the more often you avoid what's hard in favor of what's easy, the more your brain associates comfort with success, even though at the behavioral level, you're doing the opposite of growing. You're reinforcing avoidance. You're practicing hesitation. You're wiring in passivity. And all of this happens below your level of awareness. This is not a psychological theory. This is neurobiology. The basal ganglia, the part of your brain responsible for habit formation, does not care about your goals. It cares about consistency. It encodes repeated actions regardless of whether those actions are helpful or harmful. It doesn't judge the behavior, it reinforces the pattern. So when you repeatedly choose comfort, when you repeatedly opt out of challenge, you're programming your brain to expect comfort and to seek it automatically. This is where the idea of comfort as a cage becomes not just metaphorical, but neurological. You're literally building a neural network, a brain-wide operating system that locks you into cycles of familiarity and low effort. The more you practice that cycle, the more automatic it becomes. And the more automatic it becomes, the harder it is to interrupt. Eventually, you don't even realize it's happening. You just feel tired. You don't have time. You say, maybe later. You say, I just don't feel motivated. And those all sound like valid reasons, but they're not. They're symptoms. They're the biological consequences of a brain that has been rewarded over and over again for not trying. Now, contrast that with what we know about peak performers. Athletes, elite military, top scientists, entrepreneurs who build 10-figure empires, they all share one trait that's almost universal. They've learned how to derive satisfaction from deliberate discomfort. They've rewired their brain so that the dopamine hits don't come from avoiding challenge, they come from engaging it. We've seen this in fMRI studies. People who consistently pursue hard goals have a shift in their mesolimbic dopamine pathway, that's the reward circuit. Instead of getting a spike from finishing something easy, they get it from pushing their threshold, from hitting the edge of their ability, from getting stronger, not staying safe. You can do the same thing, but it starts with understanding this core idea. Your brain doesn't care about meaning, it cares about signals. If you keep rewarding it for escaping effort, it will keep asking for more escape. If you start rewarding it for effort itself, even before the outcome, it will adapt to that too. So, what's the first step? Stop treating comfort like a prize. It's not. It's a neutral state. It's only useful in short bursts, like after a workout or after a day of strategic work. But when it becomes the default, it becomes corrosive, it erodes grit. It dulls your edge. It tricks you into thinking that you're fine when you're actually stuck. And this leads us directly into the next idea. Your brain learns what you repeat, not what you wish. So many people are walking around with brilliant ideas, powerful ambitions, compelling visions of who they could become. But they don't follow through, not because they don't care, but because they don't understand how the brain works. The brain is not moved by inspiration alone. It needs evidence. It needs consistent, repeated, reinforced behaviors that align with the identity you want to build. This is the science of neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to change itself through behavior. It doesn't happen just by thinking differently. That can help, but it's not sufficient. Neuroplasticity is behavior-driven. Repetition is what rewires the synapses. Think of your neural circuits like a trail in a forest. The more often you walk it, the clearer and faster the path becomes. That's how habits are formed, through repeated signaling between neurons. That repeated signaling strengthens the synaptic connection, and once a neural pathway becomes strong enough, it takes over. It becomes the default. Now, most people understand this conceptually. They get that habits matter, but they still fall into a trap. They keep trying to build new habits from a place of emotion. They want to feel motivated before they act. They want to feel ready. They want to feel clear and confident, but that's not how it works. In fact, that's the opposite of how the brain works. Motivation is a byproduct of action, not a prerequisite for it. The prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for planning, intention, logic, doesn't get stronger by thinking about action. It gets stronger by executing, by doing. So when you repeat an action, even a small one, your brain gets the message, this matters. And it starts allocating more resources to support that behavior. It improves your focus, it reduces resistance, and it starts reinforcing the identity associated with that behavior. This is why, for example, showing up to the gym consistently, even if you're tired, even if your workout is subpar, is more important than crushing it once every few weeks. The repetition matters more than the intensity, because you're not just training your body. You're training your brain to believe, I am someone who shows up. The same goes for writing, for speaking, for leadership, for relationships. Consistency is king, not perfection, not passion, not talent, just showing up. The hippocampus and the striatum, two areas deeply involved in learning and memory, don't encode desire. They encode frequency. That means they don't care how much you want something, they care how often you act on it. You can want something deeply, but if you don't act repeatedly, your brain doesn't update. It still sees you as the old version of yourself. This is why so many people feel stuck. They're wishing for transformation, but they're practicing stagnation. Let's get specific here. Say you want to become more disciplined. That's great. But what behaviors are you actually repeating every day? Are you waking up with structure? Are you reducing distractions? Are you acting on your priorities before your brain gets hijacked by anxiety, fatigue, or emotion? Or are you scrolling first thing in the morning? Are you hitting snooze? Are you leaving your attention up for auction? Because those repeated actions are your real practice. That's the behavior your brain is reinforcing. That's the identity you're solidifying. And here's the catch. Your brain doesn't label behaviors as good or bad. That's your conscious mind doing the storytelling. But your neural circuits only ask one question. Is this repeated? That's it. So if you're repeating procrastination, if you're repeating avoidance, if you're repeating low-effort behaviors, you're wiring that in, even if you don't want to, even if you know better. Knowing doesn't change the brain, doing does. This is why behavior design is so powerful. If you can install small, repeatable actions into your daily structure, you can bypass the emotional resistance. You don't have to feel like doing something, you just have to start. And once you start, momentum builds, dopamine starts to flow, the neural circuits begin to shift. Let me give you a real-world example. When I coach people who want to level up, high performers who are plateauing, we don't start with vision boards or motivational speeches. We start with behavior chains. A behavior chain is a sequence of small linked actions that trigger a desired state. For example, wake up, hydrate, 90 seconds of cold exposure, 10 minutes of sunlight, 3 minutes of breath work. That chain activates the nervous system, primes the dopamine circuitry, and locks in a state of alert calm. And that state becomes the foundation for productive, focused behavior throughout the day. We're not hoping for discipline, we're engineering it, repeating it, practicing it, until it becomes default. That's what I mean when I say your brain learns what you repeat, not what you wish. Wishing is nice, it can inspire, but it doesn't rewire. You have to outbehave your past. You have to take small, deliberate actions every single day that cast votes for the person you want to become. And the beautiful part is, once your brain gets enough data that this new identity is real, it starts doing the work for you. It starts automating discipline. It starts craving progress because the circuits have shifted. The neural identity has changed. You become someone who naturally leans into challenge. You become someone who doesn't wait to feel motivated. You become someone who doesn't trust comfort, but who trusts effort. And effort, repeated over time, becomes power. That's the real rewiring. That's the real transformation.